This is Your Superior Self, episode 69. Are you crazy enough to change the world? With the champion of social good, Devin Thorpe.
So you say, what am I willing to really sacrifice for? And you might say, well, am I willing to sleep on a floor and, climb any mountain, do whatever it takes to fight poverty in Africa? You might say, well, would I be willing to go out at 2:00 in the morning to take blankets to homeless people? Would I be willing, just start testing yourself. And then you may find that there is something that you would really go to great lengths to do, that you're just really fired up about. And then think back, okay, does that align with things I've actually done in the past? Have I actually demonstrated commitment to that? And then begin to test yourself with action.
What is going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. I'm your host, Trey Downs. And did you know that Newton's law states that objects in motion stay in motion and that objects in rest stay in rest? Objects tend to keep on doing what they are doing unless acted upon by an outside force. And for those who are stuck and at rest, let me be that outside force and help motivate you to become your superior self. We all have dreams and goals. However, sometimes we lose expectancy. You have to realize that in order to get to where you want to go, you have to prepare yourself to get there, and you have to better yourself. My podcast is a vehicle for my mission, and it allows me to motivate and inspire those who want something greater for themselves. And if you are one of those people, please sign up for my email list right now and have every episode sent directly to your inbox. You can do that by going to yoursuperiorself.com and signing up over there, or you can text right now. Text the word superior to 444-999. I am fired up about today's guest, Devin Thorpe. He is doing some tremendous things in this world, and I'm excited to have a conversation with him about those things. You can find out what he's up to in his book, Your Mark on the World. You can also check him out on his podcast called the Social Impact Podcast. He interviews CEOs and celebrities like Bill Gates and Tony Robbins, and he has like over 1,000 episodes. And I want to read from his book, Your Mark on the World, and I will go ahead. It's towards the back on page 212. You cannot solve all the world's problems. They are simply too great, but don't let that stop you from doing something real, something that matters. Don't give in to the temptation to do nothing or merely a token because you can't do everything. You can do something great. Giving what you can financially and pairing that with what you can give of your time will make you incredibly powerful. You will have an impact that matters. You will be able to measure the difference, a meaningful one, in lives saved. Animals rescued, children educated, species protected, carbon emissions reduced, or whatever you choose to do and measure. Set measurable goals, measure your progress, make it happen. The world is waiting for you to matter. The best thing about this book is that the stories in it are of ordinary people, and they're just doing remarkable things in the world to try and make it a better place. And I hope that this episode helps you get inspired to start your mission. So without further ado, here is Devin Thorpe. Hey, what's going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. Tonight I am joined with Devin Thorpe. I am very excited because he's a journalist, entrepreneur, and his nickname is Champion of Social Good. Devin, thank you so much for joining the show.
Trey, what an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. You just have such a great show. I'm honored.
Well, thank you so much for that. What are you up to today? What's going on in your world?
Oh, it's a great spring day out here in Utah where it was cold and on the border of snowing all day. I count my blessings, it rained. So,
so you have this awesome nickname, Champion of Social Good. Like, how did you get that, and what is it that has helped you obtain this name?
Well, I call myself a champion of social good, so I'm not sure it's anything but self promotion. But I am grateful that people recognize me that way and think of me that way. But yeah, that's kind of what I do is I champion the good that other people are doing to solve the world's big problems.
What would you say right now is a problem that you're focused on in the world and would like to help solve?
Well, I focus on three areas: extreme poverty, public health, and climate change. And over the last few years, I've begun to focus a bit more. Climate change was kind of the third place of those three in my mind, and it's sort of worked its way to the top just because um, compared to the other two, we're not making progress as quickly. I'm very confident that we will. The crisis mentality will abate for a variety of reasons. Uh, Electric cars are just better. Uh, Renewable energy is just cheaper, right? We're going to switch away from coal just simply because it's cheaper. I really have a sense that so many of the things that we need to do to stem or even reverse climate change make such great economic sense that we won't be able to not do them. That's how compelling they will be. So I'm very optimistic. I think we're going to love the future. I mean, think about a world in which the marginal cost of electricity is zero, right? But that's how it works with solar and wind. You put it up and then it's zero fuel, right? Energy just comes out. And in 25 years, windmills will still function. Solar panels will still generate electricity, but they will long since have been paid for. And so we will live in a world of cheap energy, abundant energy. Let me be very clear, cheap, abundant energy. So what do we get from cheap, abundant energy? We get flying cars, right? It will suddenly make economic sense for us to hop in a flying taxi to go anywhere in LA or New York or Sao Paulo. It's going to be awesome.
I can't wait for that. Like how far out are we, do you think?
I think we will see flying taxis in major cities within 3 to 5 years.
Really?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
close?
yeah,
Because if you would have asked me, I would have said another 15 years or so.
yeah. No, the vehicles are there already. There are competing standards and technologies that are working very well, and so I think we're really talking about 3 to 5 years before they are operating at the consumer level. So that, like you and I, when we go to New York, when we go, we can afford not just like now you can take a helicopter right from LaGuardia or from JFK to the city, but we'll be able to take a flying taxi that'll take 2 or 3 times as long, but still, 20 minutes instead of an hour and a half to get into the city. And we'll be able to go to any one of dozens of places in the city from the airport and vice versa. And so it'll be super convenient and it'll be reasonably affordable. I mean, I'm guessing we'll pay 100 or 150 bucks for that trip.
I just hope the taxi driver is a little bit better than the one that I had today.
I think the taxi driver in those taxis will be nobody. I think
Yeah,
they
that
will
is
be
true.
it'll be
Yeah.
self-driving. It'll just be point to
Autopilot.
point. You just get in and it'll go and you'll land and you'll be freaked out the whole time.
So how did you get into this space? Like you weren't always into social change or social responsibility, were you? Like were you? I think you were a CFO at one point, correct?
Yeah, yeah. You're exactly right. I was a finance guy for 25 years. So where does this come from? The honest truth is when I was a kid, I was 11 years old and there was a dam in southern Idaho that broke and it flooded the town of Rexburg, Idaho, a town of about 13,000 people. And it damaged or destroyed about 80% of the structures in Rexburg. And so it was a big deal. And communities from all around the Western United States really rallied around this town to help. And one day that summer, my dad came to me and he said, Devin, I'm going to go to Rexburg to dig muck and mud out of basements. Do you want to come? I said, well, sure. That sounds fun. I was 11. And so I remember we got on that bus about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was so excited, going on the Greyhound bus up to Rexburg. And we drove, got there about dawn, had a donut and went to work, worked all day, got back on the bus at dark and came home. We were gone almost 24 hours. And, the reality as I look back on it is I'm a pretty small guy now. I like to say I'm middle seat sized. And, you picture me as an 11-year-old. I probably didn't actually do any good. I probably didn't, contribute my donut's worth of the work done that day. But I sure felt good. I felt like I had made a difference. I felt like I had been helpful. And so I vowed a vow that I would never miss an opportunity to do good, to help other people. And of course I did along the way, but that guided me throughout my life. And when I was fired from that job as CFO, really the best job I'd ever had, I saw the opportunity to sort of channel that enthusiasm of my youth and to refocus my life on doing good. And I started with a year in China, where I taught at South China University of Technology. It was a way for me I perceived it as a way to give back and also a way to get away from what I'd been doing to really think about what I valued in the world. And I wrote a book while I was in China called Your Mark on the World and launched launched a new career. And I've been happy every day since.
Let's talk about like that area in your life. Like a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, he got fired and then he started this, but it's not that easy. Like that whole transition, like you had to have some negative thoughts and you had to have doubted yourself in that time frame. Like talk about that. Like, was there ever a time in that transitional period where you didn't know what was going on with your path, and were you ever confused at any point?
It's interesting. I'll never forget the moment when the reality really hit me that I was no longer the CFO of this great company where I'd worked for nearly 3 years. And it was a feeling of utter and total relief. I approached my job with a real zeal and passion. And I probably drove some people crazy at times, but I really was a bit of a mother hen, right? And I think that's kind of the CFO's job, to worry about the margins and operating costs, and not just in the finance department. It's not just the accountant role of adding things up. It's really taking the proactive senior executive role to make sure that we're operating at our best in every aspect. Well, that's a lot to shoulder. And I remember walking in the morning thinking, boy, I've got all these things I got to worry about and all these things I got to do. And then realizing an hour or two later, I don't have to worry about any of that. None of that. That's not my job anymore. And so, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to focus on in response to your question. But that gave me quite a positive place to start from. I was able to look out and say, the world is my oyster. It's like graduating from college again and saying, what do I want to do? I can do anything I want. And the folks at my company were very gracious, very generous to me, and gave me, it wasn't a Wall Street Journal kind of severance package, let's be clear, but I got a severance package. And so I was able to make this transition smoothly. And oh my gosh, it's just been wonderful. Wonderful.
That's interesting because a lot of people compare that to a loss of a family member or some type of death where they get separated from their corporation for how many X amount of years, and it's almost like this. It's like this rejection, right? Like people tend to go into depression. They can't understand what just happened. What would be your advice to those types of people that feel that type of rejection?
I would acknowledge that whatever someone feels is real, right? I don't want to suggest that anyone who's listening who thinks, well, I had that experience and I did it differently, that you're doing it wrong somehow. But what I did was to focus on action and opportunity. I started a little business that quickly failed.
What was the business?
I started a little vitamin business.
Really?
I had a partner, and I say it was little. We were pretty serious about it. I think we put 25 grand into it, so it was not nothing, but it wasn't a lot. And we bought a bunch of inventory and built a website and started marketing. And boy, we just could not make it happen. And so very quickly, my time in China came up, and I kind of launched that business thinking that I might be able to run that remotely from China. What I did from China was to wind it down with my partner. So that was a little experience, but I did the China thing, and then quickly wrote a book. So I was very, very much busy doing things. I took control of my future rather than getting into a cycle of just looking for a job.
I love that. How you can take control and turn that negative into a positive.
Now, I will tell you, the honest truth is, if I had done the exact opposite, if I had hunkered down, worked out a budget to be frugal and make the money last, and used the next year to look for a great job, I'd have made more money than I've made with the new career. But I can guarantee I wouldn't have been happier.
How did you transition into this? Like, you are a speaker, you are a podcaster, you're a YouTuber, you are an entrepreneur. How did you, were you always so good at speaking? Like, is that just something that you had to work on?
Oh, having worked now as a speaker for several years, I can tell you that the very best speakers are the ones that are working the hardest to refine and perfect after every single speech, right? They never cut themselves any slack. The great ones will videotape every speech and watch it and critique themselves and practice before the next one. I am not the world's greatest speaker. I'm going to tell you that right now. But no one gets to be a great professional speaker and make a fortune without being a great speaker, and it takes a tremendous amount of work. I'm still working. I get better every time I'm on stage. I learn from each experience, but yeah, it's a trick. What I had not anticipated when I started down this path was the podcast and the YouTube show. It started as a YouTube show, and after 300 episodes, I started sort of simulcasting as a YouTube show and as a podcast. And now done over 1,000 episodes. But I didn't see that coming when I left my CFO job. But it's the thing I enjoy doing the most. I enjoy meeting great people like you all the time and talking to them about their stories. And I may not have your gift, but I have the same passion that you have. I just love talking to people, and the people I have on, most of them are people who are really changing the world, really making a difference. And it really inspires me every day. Anytime I'm tempted to be discouraged, I think about all the different problems that people are solving in so many different ways. And I think, there's not a problem we can't solve. And as more of us engage in that effort to solve problems, we will become even more and more successful. And, I dream of a day when we talk about poverty, and what we're referring to is people who buy their self-driving Mercedes on the used market instead of new, right? That's my idea of the poverty, right? That's where I want to get. Mm-hmm. And I think we're just in a world where that isn't that far off, right? Trey, you and I are going to see that. Maybe I may be exaggerating a little bit there, but you and I, right? We will live in a world without extreme poverty. We will live in a world where communicable diseases are really a thing of the past. We will live in a world where few people die of cancer and most people are diagnosed early and treated effectively. And we don't think about cancer the same way we do today. We'll think about cancer the way we think about the flu now. You and I ignore the fact that some people die every year from the flu because it doesn't kill most people. Mm-hmm. And that's how I see cancer in 30 years, right? Yeah, there'll be a few people who get cancer, but we just give them drugs and they get better most of the time. It's only, those rare cases when some dude feels great, never gets it diagnosed and gets sick. But that'll be the rare exception. What'll happen most of the time is people get treated.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be living in an amazing time, and it will come upon us inch by inch, and we won't really notice it. But make a note to, in 2045, 2050, look back and see if you can't see some huge differences between 2019 and 2050.
I think that people inside of the U.S., we get stuck in this bubble, right? We get stuck in our own little worlds, and we don't really pay attention to the problems out in the world because we don't see it. It's not interface unless we constantly watch the news, which is, I try not to do that just because the negativity that's spread throughout, and some of the false reports and stuff like that. I don't want to be associated with that, and I don't want my day to be ruined by a ton of negativity. Where can people go to research, climate change and poverty, and where can we go to get more informed about those things going on in the world?
Well, on climate change, I would point everyone to a website called projectdrawdown.org as your first resource. I have nothing to do with it, right? This is not at all self-promotion. Project Drawdown is a list of 100 climate change solutions. These are not pie-in-the-sky solutions. The first 80 are all solutions that are already implemented at scale. They're proven and they're already working. And some of them are like you'd never guess, right? What's regenerative agriculture, right? And new ways of making concrete. But the magical thing about the new way of making concrete, you use a little bit of coal ash in your concrete. Not only are you sequestering carbon, but you make better concrete cheaper. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait a minute, you mean we can make concrete cheaper and sequester carbon at the same time? Well, why wouldn't we do that? And there's some surprising things that we can do that have a much bigger impact than we ever would have imagined. The second biggest opportunity for reducing climate change is to reduce food waste. There's so much energy used in producing food no one eats that is a huge contributor, huge to climate change. And if we just figure out how to use our food more efficiently, and different people I talk to emphasize different parts of the supply chain, but the bottom line is most of it's really in our hands. If we will just eat more of the food we buy, we contribute tremendously to ending climate change. But I bet you never thought about that as a climate change solution.
No, not at all.
To say nothing about the way that would also impact our ability to feed a couple billion more people. We're likely to see another 2.5 billion by 2050 and another billion by the end of the century. It's not a dramatic increase. I'm not worried about being able to feed all those people, if I'm being honest. We've grown the population threefold in my lifetime. We've tripled the population, for crying out loud. We're not going to have any trouble adding another 30% and feeding them. I don't want to suggest the world is infinite, but we don't need to worry about the food supply that much. But here we have a double zinger, right? We can help feed the world and reduce climate change all in one thing. So anyway, go to projectdrawdown.org to learn about climate change solutions, and don't get bogged down in the debate over how bad climate change is or it's going to be, because most of the interventions for climate change make us better off in other ways anyway. We want to do them. There are very few of the interventions for climate change that we'd say, oh man, that's kind of a pain. Very few. So go there. The World Bank and the World Health Organization are great resources for learning about poverty and global health. Great resources out there to learn a lot more than what I could ever tell you.
I hope you guys are enjoying this show. In response to numerous inquiries on how to support the show, I've started a Patreon account to accept donations. These donations will help your superior self reach and serve more people and improve the quality and content of the show. I appreciate your donations, and you can find the link in the show notes, or you can visit yoursuperiorself.com and click the button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. Thank you guys for all your support. Now, back to the show. On your podcast and your YouTube channel, I'm assuming you discuss a lot of these topics in that content, right? So that's another great resource is to head over, check out Devin's YouTube channel and podcast. I'm sure they can learn a ton from some of your guests that you had on the show. I mean,
we have had amazing people. We had amazing people on the show.
Yeah, you had Tony Robbins for one. I mean, I think everybody knows who that is.
Yeah, Tony was just an amazing guest. I was just so totally blown away by him. I've talked to people who've had negative experiences with him, and I think it comes from Tony's absolute passion for what he does. Mm-hmm. So if he's going to be on stage, he's going to give you 110%. And so if he's going to do something that intense, he's going to be focused ahead of time. So you bump into him in the hallway right before he goes on, he's probably not going to give you the time of day. It's not because he doesn't like you. It's not because he doesn't value you as a human being, but he's getting ready to go talk to 5,000 people or 10,000 people and make a difference in 10,000 lives. He's focused on that. But he was great on the show. He was just so personable. I was blown away. But he shared his story, and it's not a story he shared with me exclusively by any means. It's a popular Tony Robbins story, but he talked about how his life was changed by someone who brought his family a turkey at Thanksgiving when they were dirt poor. And he talked about how that influenced his life and how he has always made providing food for people who don't have enough a part of his deal. That's just part of what he's always done since he was like 16 years old. That's just part of Tony. And it's amazing that has become such a big thing. And so when I had him on my show, I think it was 2015, he was in the middle of an effort to provide like 300 million meals.
Wow.
From the sale of his book and matching funds to an organization called Feeding America. And just really, truly an amazing guy.
Yeah, that's his legacy, right? Like his legacy is going to be always giving and feeding, the hungry. And
yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done?
Boy, I should be more focused on that question, but I'm in the trenches every day doing what I love, trying to make a difference, and I'm not anywhere ready to think about a legacy. It would be a great legacy to forget the credit I get for it. I would just love to see a world that plays out as I'm describing it, right? I want to live to 2045, 2050. I want to look back with you, Trey, and say, yeah, there it is. We've reversed climate change. We don't talk about it anymore. We don't worry about it. Look at the windmill. Everything's good. I want to look back and say, if you noticed how, like no one dies of AIDS, no one dies of cancer, no one dies of malaria anymore. Like right now, this minute, there are 300 million cases of malaria or something like that every single year. 400,000 people die every year from malaria. We can live in a world where nobody dies from malaria. Mm-hmm. And I think we will. And that doesn't affect you and me very much, but it'll be remarkable to say, wow, that is so different than 30 years ago. And, an extreme poverty, my gosh, it's been radical. Like, I remember my first visit to Mexico City. And you go to Mexico City now, it's a completely different place. Mexico City is this cosmopolitan, thriving, modern city, global player. When I was there 30 years ago, impoverished, squalor everywhere. Mexico just isn't a poor country anymore. There are a few poor people, like there are poor people in the United States. Maybe a
Sure.
term that's not particularly politically correct, but people with low incomes in both countries. But Mexico isn't a poor country. But 30 years ago it was. And so, yeah, there are poor countries in Africa. There are a few there, a few in Asia, but there won't be in 30 years, right? The idea of a whole country full of extremely poor people, that just won't exist. And it'll be wonderful. It'll be wonderful.
We had talked a little bit about your passion, which is talking to people and getting to know their stories, and you draw inspiration from that, right? So you kind of you have a gift for that. Like, I watched a couple of your shows, YouTube, and I haven't listened to your podcast yet, but you have this knack of connecting with someone on a level and talking about the problems in the world. Like, what has been your biggest lesson from speaking with these influencers? What has helped you along your path as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think there's a thread here I want to try and tug at a minute to explain this, but there are a few people that I have come across that are remarkable for what they have accomplished, and also for how completely unremarkable they are. Now, like Tony Robbins is a remarkable guy, and you spend a couple of minutes with him and you realize, if you had never heard of him and you spent a couple of minutes with him, you realize that's a remarkable human being. But a lot of people that are out there changing the world are not remarkable at all. They are remarkable only in their unremarkableness. And yet they are making a huge difference. And my favorite example of this is a woman by the name of Suzanne Ray. She's an Australian woman. She's about 70, 72 now, I think. And she's a member of a Rotary Club. And after her husband died, she decided that she wanted to try and raise more money for Rotary's fight to eradicate polio. And so she created a new website and kind of asked people to report their successful fundraisers on her website. She calls it the world's greatest meal to end polio. And it's kind of simple, but she started getting traction. And in some ways you'd say, well, it didn't even deserve the traction it got because Rotary was already raising money to eradicate polio, and she just sort of piled on. But what happened is she began to get traction around Australia and then other parts of the world. She would start going to these places. And so I actually had her on my show, and then 6 months or a year later, I ended up keynoting a conference where she had traveled to be another speaker at a Rotary conference, and saw her in action. And again, I saw something that I thought was quite interesting. She was remarkably unremarkable. And yet she was traveling around the world and had clearly been a catalyst for raising millions of dollars for the fight against polio that would not have been raised otherwise. Millions of dollars. And she was as ordinary a person as you have ever met. And I don't mean that in any way as a criticism. I want to be respectful to her and inspire everyone. But as I look the Tony Robbins of the world are really the exceptions. The people who are changing the world most of the time are remarkably unremarkable.
Mm-hmm.
They're just ordinary people who had the audacity to say, hey, I guess I could change the world. I could go do that and make the world better. And then they do. It just comes from this amazing place. So, yeah, I'm inspired all the time by ordinary people who have that tremendous, unbelievable, I sometimes refer to it as being crazy, right? Crazy
Mm-hmm.
enough to think they can change the world, and they do.
Mm. But you have to connect with them, right? To get that, well, not maybe not to get that message, but to feel that inspiration. Like, how do you
Yeah.
connect with the remarkable people and the ordinary? Like, what is there a tactic that you use in your interviews?
No. I have one of my problems. I view it as kind of a character flaw, but I have never viewed powerful and important people with probably enough respect. I'm not adequately intimidated by them. And I do consciously try to respect everyone. And so that what I'm really trying to do is to treat everyone the way I would treat Tony Robbins, and to treat Tony Robbins the way I treat everyone, right? With respect, admiration, concern, and look for that human connection.
Commonality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we all have so much more in common than is different. That was one of the key lessons I took from my experience in China.
Sure. I think, just connecting with someone, it's so, like, some people, especially now in the community world, like, no one wants to really talk to anybody. Nobody really wants to take the time to learn about someone. I know on my podcast, that's the one thing I love is having like you on the show and having someone who is just starting out in a business and just connecting and hearing their story and hearing what motivates them and inspires them and their lessons and their failures and
Yeah,
just getting to learn who they are as a person, as a human being, and just relating to some of the things that we have in common.
yeah. Your interview with Andre recently was just amazing. I mean, here's this guy was sentenced to 100 years in prison. 100 years. Gets into prison and kind of teaches himself the law, files an appeal, and gets out, changes his life. I mean,
Yeah, and
your interview was brilliant. I mean, I loved the way you walked through that with him. It was brilliant,
the
brilliant job.
thing that blew my mind about that, and thank you so much for that compliment, is the part where he said, "There's no difference," and I'm paraphrasing here. There's no difference between 100-year sentence in jail and 100 years in an fulfilled life. And I was like, wow, like that was like my mind exploded. I was like, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are differences, obviously physical differences, but think about that, right? So if you're still serving this time, you're just coasting through life, living, your life on cruise control. You're being told when to wake up, when to go to work, when you can work out, when you can eat, and it's the same thing. And that really hit home for me, because it was like, it's all about how you approach the day and how you show some gratitude for where you're at, because there are people out there that are less fortunate than you. And I don't think a lot of people in the States can really grasp that idea. Like, we just don't see it. It's not on our faces. But if you're currently unhappy with what you do and where you're at in life, the first thing you have to change is your mindset and show gratitude for whatever situation you're in. I did another interview. Man, his name escapes me, but he did time over in a Thai prison, Thailand, and obviously the prison system over there is just brutal. It is terrible, and he was having a discussion with one of the natives there, who I want to say he was a native from the countryside of Thailand, where they they get talked into bringing drugs and stuff into Bangkok, and they're easily picked off by the cops because they stand out like a sore thumb because they're not used to the city and they're not from there. So when they get there, they're all struck by the architecture and all the busyness of a city. So they get picked up by the cops pretty easily, and he was in there, and he's sentenced to life, and he's going to stay in a Bangkok prison for the rest of his life. And this guy turns to the guy that interviewed him, was basically like, it could be worse. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I am here. And it's like, wow, like a guy is facing a lifetime sentence in Bangkok prison, and his mentality is, it could be worse.
That is a powerful, powerful lesson. And it's really true. It sounds trite, right? It sounds like that can't possibly help. But think about the power of being able to say in almost any situation, it could be worse. And, the next step, I have a good friend, Paul Jenkins, that taught me this principle. But, the next step is to say, it could also be better. What could I do to make it better? And then you can you make that as action oriented and as immediate as to say, what could I do to make it better by 8 o'clock? And you start thinking about that and you go, wow, I could do something between now and 8 o'clock that would make my life better. And then you have taken control. You've shifted your mind completely from woe is me to it could be worse to how do I make it better? And that is so empowering. Your whole life changes when you can make that switch from, oh my gosh, woe is me. Well, it could be worse. What do I do to make it better?
Yeah, I just looked at the interview, and it was finding happiness after a fateful decision with T.M. Hoy. So go back and listen to that. But I find that in the morning I've started this routine getting up at 5 a.m. and it's called. I just got done reading the book Miracle Morning, and I'm trying to start my day off the best way for me. So I'm meditating at 5 a.m. I'm listening to the quiet, and I'm trying to be grateful for where I'm at in my life and reflect and visualize. And I promise you this, like, I'm not a morning person whatsoever. I love to sleep in. But this practice that I've just implemented in my life, I'm already seeing a difference.
Yeah, I can imagine. It does change your life, right? To change your mindset in ways that make you more positive. Powerful stuff.
So let's say I am an ordinary guy. I'm crazy enough to think that I can change the world. Where should I start? What would be the easiest thing for me to do?
Well, I think the thing you need to do first is to figure out what you want to change. And I would begin to ask yourself questions like, what makes me sad? What makes me mad? What makes me glad? And think about, go to a place where you say, what am I willing to really sacrifice for? And you might say, well, am I willing to sleep on a floor and, climb any mountain, do whatever it takes to fight poverty in Africa? You might say, well, would I be willing to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning to take blankets to homeless people? Would I be willing, just start testing yourself. And then you may find that there is something that you would really go to great lengths to do, that you're just really fired up about. And then think back, okay, does that align with things I've actually done in the past? Have I actually demonstrated commitment to that? And then begin to test yourself with actions, right? Are you willing to give some money to that cause? Are you willing to raise some money for that cause? For some of us, raising money is harder than giving money. Are you willing to volunteer your time in something related to that cause? And for some people, saving animals is more important than saving people. Totally fine. Do that. But look for where your heart is driving you. And, for some people, that's going to be the environment. And for other people, it'll be other things. But just the key thing, the key first thing is really to figure out what fires you up one way or another, that makes you angry or sad or happy, and so that you can go pursue that thing and making that happen, and more.
Is climate change what fires you up? Is that like I mean, we talked about the three areas where you focus at, but is climate change what fires you up? Like that's where you're probably going to sacrifice most of your time?
No, no. I guess what I would say is I feel that is perhaps the most acute issue of the three, and not because it's more important in the long run or anything like that. It's just that I see such great progress on poverty and health, and we still really haven't made the progress I think we can and should on climate change. There's a lot of inertia in sort of legacy systems that we need to abandon and switch over to better, cleaner technologies. And I want to be an advocate for accelerating that process so that we can avoid the worst effects of climate change. Most scientists agree that we have about 10 years to act, starting with 2019. This is year one, and so we've burned part of year one already, nearly 4 months. Yeah, we got to get going on this quickly. Let me give you just we're clearly seeing the level of carbon in the atmosphere increasing still. That is still going on. We're still burning more fossil fuels every year than the year before when the economy grows. There's only been 1 year that was an exception to that. I think 2016, the economy grew and fossil fuel use declined. But 1 year ever is, I think, the only time that's happened, and since we've been keeping records of such things. By contrast, when I was born, about 60% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. Think about that. 60% didn't know where their next meal was coming from. They didn't have money for anything, hardly at all. And most of them didn't have clean water, no sanitation. Today, the number of people living in those conditions is about 10% of the world's population. And that's at a time when we have added billions of people to the planet. So essentially, everyone who's been born has been born into better circumstances, mathematically, not literally. But I mean, it's a remarkable time, remarkable, incredible progress. Everyone in the global development world takes seriously the idea that we can eliminate extreme poverty by 2030. We may not get there, but everyone thinks it's doable. It's something we could actually do. And that's just 11 years away now. So we're living in a remarkable time for the eradication of poverty. I mentioned a little bit about polio. 30 years ago, there were 350,000 cases of polio every year. Last year, there were 32, not 32,000, 32. 32 cases in the whole world. So we're on the cusp, right on the verge of eradicating the second human disease that's ever been eradicated. And it just proves that we can do that over and over again, I believe. So very exciting progress on those fronts. We're really not in the same momentum mode on climate change. And so that's why I feel some urgency there that I don't quite feel in the other two areas right now.
Sure. You have written 5 books. And I need to get better at learning about climate change, poverty, and diseases that affect this world. And if I were to buy one, like which one should I buy that you've written that's going to help me become a more knowledgeable in these areas?
Well, it's funny. My most popular book by far is a book called 925 Ideas to Help You Save Money, Get Out of Debt, and Retire a Millionaire so you can leave your mark on the world. But I still think the best book I've ever written is a book called Your Mark on the World. And so that's the one I would recommend. It's a little longer, but it's better organized, a little more deliberate, and it's going to help you develop your personal strategy for using your time and money to really make a difference in the world.
I love that. I could talk to you all night, Devin.
Thank you.
Where can people connect with you?
Golly, I'm everywhere on the internet, but I do have a new thing that I'll plug if you don't mind, and that is
Sure.
about 18 months ago I launched a new website called goodcrowd.school. It's basically I call it school for change makers, right? So if you're interested in changing the world at all, there's a lot of great content there, and increasingly what I'm doing is I'm attracting experts to do the courses for me. It's not just Devin. I started out with it's just Devin's courses, but now it's other people's brilliant courses and just amazing stuff. And we're adding new stuff all the time. And in fact, tomorrow I'm going to be recording a new course, and so I'm really excited about goodcrowd.school. People can connect with me there or on my website at devinthorpe.com.
Make sure you guys connect with him. His content is unbelievable, and I'm excited to pick up his new book. So Devin, I like to close out the show with kind of a little inspirational chat or talk from you. Just imagine that I am that guy, that ordinary guy, and I really need help directing my energy towards a great cause. What would be your advice to me?
Well, I hate to sound like a Nike commercial, but just do it, right? The lesson that I think it's the most important lesson that I've learned, we talked about it already, is this principle that you really can change the world. There's a popular notion out there that the only thing that could ever change the world is a small group of committed people, right? But the fact is, a small group of committed people really starts with one person that is committed to a cause. One person really does matter. One person can make a huge difference. And I suspect most people that are listening are already making a big difference in one way or another. And the only thing I would encourage people to do is to look for ways to scale the good they're already doing. Because in some cases, just replicating it, repeating it, teaching others to do it, there are lots of different ways to scale and expand good that's being done in the world so that more people can benefit from it. But as we all come together and work to solve the world's problems, I'm really convinced that there is no problem we can't solve.
I love that. His name is Devin Thorpe. He is the champion of social good. Check him out, guys. Devin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, the pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you so much for having me, Trey. You've been great.
I want to say thank you to Devin Thorpe for coming on the show and hanging out with us today and giving us some inspiration to go back into our lives and help give back to the world and try to make it a better place. I want to say thank you to the listener for downloading this episode. Please hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts from. If you want to follow me on social media, please check me out at Instagram at TDowns80, on Twitter at DownsTrey, and on Facebook at Trey Downs. You can also like the community that I'm trying to start at Your Superior Self, kind of a supportive group, a supportive community where we support one another and we have each other's backs. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I hope you guys are having a great week. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week. All right, guys. Later.
No voice. Good luck trying to make it big on a voice. Yeah, it's all a game. It's all a game. Better get your quarters out. Gotta play to win. Try not to